Hi, you're watching Bike Routes of Brum, a channel dedicated to finding safe cycle routes across Birmingham. In this video, we'll be cycling from Moor Street Station to the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital in Northfield, as requested by one of the viewers named Joseph. In this route, we'll be using quiet streets, the entire length of the A38 Cycle Lane, and some other shared pathways, and it should take about 45 minutes to cycle. The route is a little convoluted around Bourneville as to avoid cycling along the A38 murder strips along the Bristol Road once it leaves Selly Oak. Hopefully the A38 Cycle Lane is actually going to be extended soon all the way to Longbridge, so this video will become redundant. But until then, this seems like one of the safest ways to get there. I've put a link to the route into the description below so you can download the GPX file for yourself. So we're going to start outside of Moor Street Station. If you come from the actual station itself, you can just walk up to this crossing here and join the route from there. And we're going to cross onto St Martin's Queensway, where we're actually going underneath the bull ring here. This little tunnel is only used by taxis, bikes and buses, so it's not usually too busy. And it should be quite safe to cycle along. It's once you get here, more taxis start appearing, and you've got lots of pedestrians walking around, and then you get into the bit where the bull ring car park punts you out. But it's never normally too busy, and people aren't speeding at this point. We're going to come down this hill though and avoid any cars randomly parked on the side, and we're going to take a left into Hurst Street. And if you watched other videos that I've done before, you'll know that I've moaned about this little section before, and you can see why. It's just full of people. It punts you out right next to a giant statue, and it's just annoying to actually cycle along. But once we're out of this, we're then back onto Hurst Street, where although it's one way for cars, it's two ways for cycles as we go down. And we get to this little crossing, wait for our turn, and we go over and continue onto the one-way bit along Hurst Street, but there's a nice cycle lane for us. We're going to take a right then onto Kent Street, where we're heading towards the start of the A38 cycle route. This bit is a bit of a building site at the moment, so it's not the best to cycle along. And for the moment, we're having to take a diversion here onto Gooch Street, because even though that bit there was meant to open in, I think, June 2023, it's now almost April 2024, and they still haven't opened it. So rather than diverting cars around, which would be no issue to them at all, and allowing bikes to carry on, instead they've sacked off the bike lane and forced us to go on a massive detour, which is really annoying. It just shows where we stand in terms of the priority of people in the city. We're like the lowest of the low, basically, which I know it does annoy me a little bit, but there you go. But now we're on to the A38 Blue Route. Some of you might be watching this wondering why it's called the Blue Route, because if you look at it now, it's basically the same colour as the tarmac. Once upon a time, it was actually blue. I think it could do with a bit of a refresh, to be honest. I don't know whether they just painted it before or whether it was actually like blue tarmac, but I really do think it could do with a bit of a refresh so people can see that it is, a proper cycle lane, because people walk in this all the time, especially along that strip there. Now we're going to cross over the giant junction here. Just be careful when you're crossing it. We do have our own lights as cyclists to go across, but it can take a little while, so there is a temptation to just kind of nip your way across, but just be careful of cars coming from all different directions. But now we get to the top of this hill, and we're now going to cross over past these cars, and then we've got a nice long straight stretch. So for those of you who've watched many of my other videos, you'll be really familiar with this section, and I apologise for making you watch it again. For those of you who are new and not aware of this stretch, this is the main bit of the A38 cycle lane that stretches all the way from Hurst Street, where we joined it, and it goes all the way to the Selly Oak triangle where the old Sainsbury's was, that's now been demolished, and it's got that weird kind of half completed section in Selly Oak High Street that we'll be going along, and you'll see me moan about later. And we'll basically be following the route all the way from the very start to the very end. Now, I mentioned at the start of the video that hopefully this video will become somewhat redundant in the near future, and that's because there are plans in place to extend this route all the way to Longbridge, and this will take us past the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. It'll mean that you don't have to take the detour through Bourneville to avoid the main road, as we're going to do later on. Now, there's been some pushback about the extension of the lane now that the council is basically bankrupt. This criticism has been particularly from the MP for Northfield, Gary Sambrook. Now, I'm not sure if Gary Sambrook is genuinely clueless about how this route's being funded, or if he's just being disingenuous to try and scrape a few votes, but the funding for the extension is coming from the central government and it's not coming from Birmingham City Council. They're merely just the ones overseeing it. Now, his argument seems to be that the money should be invested in the Ray Valley route instead, which goes to show two things to me. The first one is that he doesn't really have a clue, as the Ray Valley route and the A38 diverge at Longbridge, and they don't really come near each other again until Pebble Mill Road. And even then, there's no real direct path linking them. You have to kind of, weave your way out of Cannon Hill Park, and then you've got to cross over, and it's not particularly direct. So they serve completely separate parts of South Birmingham. The second point is a wider point, and if you've ever tried to use the Ray Valley route, and you can see the bit from Sturchley to the city centre in the video that I've linked above, you can see that it's basically a leisure route, and you have to share it with dog walkers, runners and people just having a stroll. And that's fine if you're just having a little pootle on the bike, but it's not ideal if you're trying to cycle for commuting or just get around. And it indicates to me that Gary, like a lot of people, just don't see cycling as a genuine way to get around, and instead it's just a niche hobby. Now, my aim for these videos has always been to try and show that getting around Birmingham on your bike is possible, and to try and give people another choice when thinking about how they want to get around. Birmingham is massively congested with traffic, and encouraging people to use other modes of transport that aren't cars is, in my opinion, essential in making this a better place to live. I genuinely believe that extending the route to Longbridge and the bike route network in the city as a whole is key to this. And trying to court votes by lying about where funding is coming from just to appeal to drivers who already dominate the road space completely goes against this. So, rant over. I'm not sure when construction is due to start, or if it's even been finalised yet, but I'll be sure to cover it once I know a bit more. If you're interested, I'll stick a link to, there's a petition set up by Martin Price, who is one of the guys who's from Better Streets of Birmingham, and I think it's just to say, we want the A38 Cycle Lane. Don't know what good it will do, but I'll put a link to the petition anyway if you want to sign it, because the more signatures we get, the better. But now we're coming up to the weird little junction that finally gets us across and onto this side of the road, and we're going past the swimming baths there, built apparently for the Commonwealth Games, but they didn't. I don't know, there was some rumour that they were meant to be built for the Commonwealth Games, but then they didn't make it wide enough so it couldn't be used, so they had to build some of the swimming baths. I don't know how true that is. It could be one of those urban myths, but in building that, they got rid of a brilliant pub which was called the Gun Barrels, and I'll never forgive them for it. R.I.P. But now we're kind of coming into this weird section that I mentioned earlier, where the A38 route kind of peters out. Rather than going straight along and up Bournebrook High Street, we have to follow it round onto that kind of shared use path and onto Grange Road here, where we've got a one-way cycle lane here, and then we turn right here, rejoin Bristol Road, and we've got this kind of bi-directional cycle lane here, which is great, when cars aren't poking out there. But now we have to, if we're going northbound, or rather up the hill, I don't know if this is actually going south, but we have to cross the road here over the cyclist dismount sign. You see some little guy getting kicked off the bus, and basically, if you're going up the hill, you have to share it with all these pedestrians, and it's just not ideal to cycle along. Whereas if you're coming down the hill, you've got your own cycle lane. It doesn't really make any sense to me, because if you're going down the hill, you can keep up with the cars. I would have thought that would be the better one to have to share the road with. I'm not really sure what the thinking was around here, or if it's just kind of half done. I can see that the businesses on the other side don't want to lose their parking spaces, but I don't. This bit stretch doesn't really make any sense to me. Now, there is now a cycle lane on the other side, but to get to it, there's no real way to get into that bit unless you're coming from Healy Road, so it doesn't really make any sense. So it makes more sense to carry on along this bit, even though you're meant to dismount along that little stretch. The other alternative is, rather than turn into Grange Road, which we did, you can follow the ring road or the bypass all the way around, and it will pop you out like further along. But this is the most direct route, and it's the way that I took. Whether you guys, if you were actually going to use this route to get to the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital, whether you'd use it, I don't know. But we're going along here now, and you can see the old site of where the Sainsbury's used to be. I think it's going to be student flats or something, but we could turn left here and you've got a lane that will join Oak Tree Road, but it's kind of a horrible junction to use because the bike lane signal comes after the car one, so it punts you right out into the traffic, so it's not really ideal. So we're actually following this right to the end, and we're going to cross here, and we go over this crossing and straight over here, and we're going to join Langley's Road and follow this down. Now we're aiming to merge with Oak Tree Lane further on, but rather than deal with that busy intersection, and Oak Tree Lane can be quite busy with bus routes and cars that are then going to try and make their way to Sturchley, this is a quieter route to go along and just a bit nicer to cycle along. Now, at the end of the road, we're going to take a right, but you could take a left, and that will also take you into Oak Tree Lane, but just a slightly busier part of it. So I thought if we go right, you can kind of weave your way around that we're going to do. It might take you an extra minute, but it's probably a nicer way to cycle. So we're on Sellywood Road now, and we're going to follow this route round. As you can see, it's quite nice to cycle along. It's not particularly busy. If you're going this way, it's on a nice little hill, so that's good. One thing that I realised when I was actually cycling around here is how hilly Bourneville actually is. What you can, I completely, well, sometimes, you know, when I'm driving around, I don't really notice it, but when you're cycling, yeah, it is actually really hilly. So we're on Oak Tree Lane now, and we're kind of going parallel to the main road through Bourneville, but this is quite nice now that they've put a nice little modal filter just past this junction. It's made it a lot nicer to cycle along and a lot quieter, as people aren't using it as a cut through anymore. But we cross over this junction, just make sure that there's no cars coming, and we're coming up to the bit with Bourneville Park, which is really nice to walk through, especially in the autumn. We're going to take a right now onto Hay Green Lane, and this is the road that we're basically going to follow all the way through Bourneville. Now, Bourneville itself, apart from being really bloody hilly, is actually alright to cycle around. Most of it's 30-mile-an-hour roads, which isn't ideal, but you know, the roads are actually pretty wide, as you'll see, and drivers usually will give you a wide berth as you're going around. I think there is meant to be a Places for People scheme being introduced soon that's currently in the consultation stage. I know I've filled out some survey in the past on Be Heard Birmingham, and that might mean that there's a few more modal filters around and some one-way streets maybe. I mean, I'd be shocked if there was anything more adventurous, like, you know, a protected cycle lane or anything like that, given what Bourneville was like. For those of you who aren't aware, Bourneville was basically built by the Cadbury factory as a place for their employees to live, and you know, today it's managed by the Bourneville Trust, and they seem to be trying to maintain the kind of storybook village feel that it has, particularly, you know, around the centre. It is absolutely lovely, especially this time of year around springtime. Personally, I think encouraging active travel would actually enhance this image, but yeah, I just can't see anything major happening with the scheme. Now, we're kind of getting to this end bit where the road gets really thin. It definitely feels like a country lane here. Now, if I was to cycle this again, I would have gone left just there onto that little service road, because this is quite tight, and because it's on a hill as well, I can see cars. I mean, I didn't come across the cars as I was going along, but it'd just be nicer to be on the surface lane and then pop out there. Now we're going past this school, and you're finally at the top of the hill. You can breathe, and you get a little break as you can roll down. Now, the commute was trying to get me to go straight ahead and follow this road round, but I decided to hop up onto this pavement. I don't know if you're actually allowed to do this, but it will shave about 5 minutes off your cycle, and use this little lane as a cut through, and you'll pop out on whole lane. Now the road basically wants you to go round and then kind of follow the road, and it takes you back round onto here, but this is a massive shortcut that I think nobody would get annoyed with you doing it. But this bit of whole lane's alright. There's a few speed bumps, and I don't think people can bomb it along here. But what we can see in the distance is Bristol Road again, the A38, and we're basically back onto the main road now. But we've got this nice, well, it's not really nice, it's a bit rubbish. It's kind of a shared pathway with pedestrians on one side and cycles on the other. It's better than going along the road though. There were bus lanes at one point, but our old friend Gary Sambrook campaigned to get rid of those as well, so it's made it worse to cycle along basically. I know bus lanes aren't great to go along, but they're at least quieter than what we have, which is nothing. Now I don't know if you can see like kind of a crappy little strip of faded white paint there, that is the remains of an old cycle lane that went along there, but it wasn't protected, so it's kind of useless. Now, we're coming to the end. We've got the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital there on our left. But if we want to get to the place where you can park your bike, we've got to go all the way to, I think it's gate A. I'll correct myself when I see it. That's B. I can't remember which one we've just gone past. But it's a bit disheartening because you see the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. It's gate C. I apologise. You think you're there, and then you've got to go all the way to the end up the hill. But we've arrived at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. Now the bike stands are just basically right outside the front entrance, which is great. That's what most places should be doing, stick them right out the front. And we get here and there's quite a few to park your bike. So thanks for watching the video. I hope that you found it useful. If you have any other ideas for alternate routes, or you want to mention anything that I've forgotten, please feel free to comment below. I try to upload these videos as much as I can, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any routes. Thanks again for watching.